Hi everyone, don't worry, you have come to the right channel. There will be a card tutorial with you very shortly. I just thought I'd let you know what I should be doing if it being sunny in the UK. My pond is in desperate need of a little bit of love and attention. It's got lots of weed in it, as has this flower bed behind. I really need to get to it, but the Great British Weather had other plans for me. So it'll be a little while before I can get it looking like this again. This was a photograph taken last summer and when everything was looking gorgeous in the garden. At the moment it really isn't looking like that, but the weather is raining and I'm not going out in that, so I'm going to bring you a card tutorial instead. From time to time I have to go and raid in my archives because I put things away in my archives because my hard drive gets a little bit full and then I forget about them, and this was one of those cards. I made it a couple of years ago now, and I'm going to share this card with you today. So as usual, when you look at this tutorial, don't forget you don't have to use the stamps that I use. You don't have to work in the colours that I'm working in. Just have a look at some of the hints and tips and techniques, and I'm pretty sure you can come up with lots of ways to use these daisies or make alternate cards in alternate colours that suit the stash that you have at your disposal. So I'm starting out with a piece of cream cardstock that measures 11.5 inches by 5.75 inches, and I've scored it in half at 5.75. So in essence it's a 5.75 inch square card. So my cardstock is a sort of ivory colour, and I'm going to be working using a fired brick or a red distress ink. You could be using any colour combination to make this card that you want to, and you'll need a background stamp. Mine is by Hampton Arts. It's called French Kiss, although I'm not sure why. It's a flowery background and it's one of those background stamps that you find very useful. I use it a lot in my card classes, and we're going to be using it instead of patterned paper on this card. Now when you're doing this, just be a little bit careful because it's easy to get ink in places that you don't want it on your card. So it's as well as, particularly when you're stamping off the edges of your card, to sort of keep things clean as you go. So if I moved my card once I've stamped the first image and I'd caught my messy mat in any way, then obviously that's going to transfer to the back of my card. So just be a little bit careful of that. And then all I'm doing is restamping this card. And looking at my arm, I would say that even though this was videoed quite a long time ago, I may well have already been out in the garden, because that looks very much to me like I've been attacked by a rose bush. So I'm just making sure that the entire surface of the card is covered in flowers. You can see I'm being quite careful not to move my card onto the ink that I'm leaving on my messy mat, and then I'm cleaning up and flipping the card over and stamping on the back. Sorry about the shaking on the tripod. When you're pressing on larger stamps, it does shake my desk a little bit, which is what the movement is that you can see. So once again, I'm cleaning up, and then I'm going to repeat that process on the inside of the card. So it's as if I've taken a piece of patterned cardstock once I have finished with all the stamping. You can see I'm not too worried if I get any slightly faded patches, because that all adds to the charm of this sort of shabby chic look that I'm going for, and that really suits the fabric daisies, should I say, not roses, that I'm going to show you how to make. These would make great invitations if you're going to have a lovely tea party out in the garden. And now I'm going to show you how to make that pretty rag daisy. And this is all about finding pieces of fabric in your stash that you can rip and that likes to fray. So I'm using some old cotton sheeting, and again I'm stamping it exactly the same as I did on my cardstock, using that same distress ink and stamping along the entire strip. Now once you learn how to make these, you can make them in any size you like and in lots of different fabrics. You don't have to stamp them first. You can use pattern fabrics without doing any stamping. This is just quite fun to actually make your fabric match exactly your card. Again, making sure that I clear up so I don't get ink everywhere, and particularly where I don't want it. And I'm going to show you how to make this lovely raggedy daisy. So this strip starts out as a 3-inch wide strip that I've stamped, and then I'm going to fold it in half. Now the piece that I end up using is about 10 inches long to get a nice full daisy, but it really does entirely depend on what you like. You can adjust those measurements accordingly. Make smaller daisies with less wide fabric and less length. So for this size daisy, it's a 3-inch by 10-inch strip, and then we fold that in half. And then you want a needle and thread. And then you're going to do a running thread along the open edge of the fabric. So fold the two edges together and then run along the edge, roughly 1/8 of an inch in from the edge of the fabric. You don't want to be too close because the fabric does fray and you don't want your stitching to fray with it. And like I said, roughly 10 inches of fabric will get you enough gather for a nice full flower. If your fabric's a bit thicker, you might need a slightly shorter length if it gathers up too much, or if it's finer, you might want a bit of a longer piece. So definitely play it by ear and gather it up to see what length of fabric gives you the desired effect. Now before you pull up that fabric, being careful not to chop through to the raw edge. So leaving roughly 1/2 inch intact, you're going to fringe along the folded edge of your fabric strip. I would say roughly every 1/4 inch, but you can go finer if you want to. Again, it all depends on the look that you're trying to achieve and how much your fabric actually frays. If it frays a lot, you might want to do this slightly wider. This is a cotton fabric. It does fray, but not, you know, if you play with it, it will fray more. It won't just come apart, so it's quite stable, but you will get that sort of raggedy look that you're looking for. And this is where I'm kind of working out how many flowers I can get out of one strip. So I know I roughly want the 10 inches, and I'm going to get 2 pieces or 2 flowers out of this strip. Once you've fringed that piece, and then you're going to pull the end of the thread so that your daisy forms a circle. Then using the end of the same thread that you used to gather it up, you can just secure that fabric into a circle. And you can see how quick and easy that was and how effective that was. I'm going to do exactly the same for my second daisy. I was making samples for a card class, so I was making more than one card at the same time. So again, I've pulled that into a circle and just securing the 2 ends together with a couple of stitches. And then if your daisy's looking a little bit neat, just give it a good old pull about. So really scruffy it up. You can see actually I could make a different kind of flower. I was just playing with a look here. I'm just really pulling at the fabric and letting it fray a little bit more to make it look nice and raggedy. So the choice is yours. You can layer these up and make a really full flower. You can make a smaller one on top of a larger one, and you can choose to make them a little bit raggedy by really pulling at the fabric and making it fray more, or you can just leave it as it is and get a slightly neater finish. So as well as a flower, you're going to need a small 1/2 inch strip of fabric, again roughly 10 inches, that we're going to tie into a bow on our tag. So now for a little bit more shabby, I like to just rough the edges of the cardstock that I'm using. I just like to use the very edge of my scissors and run it along the edge of the cardstock. You can see it causes a little bit of a mess, but it just fluffs up the edges of the cardstock enough to go with this shabby look that we're trying to create. So I'm doing that on these two pieces of cardstock, which will become the tag on the front of the card, and I'm also going to do it all the way around the edges of the card. And whilst I do that, I'm going to tell you the measurements for the two pieces that are going to form the tag. So the white cardstock measures 2¼ inches by 5 inches, but we might adjust the length of that slightly as we position it on the front of the card. And then the red cardstock is slightly bigger, so 2½ inches by, again, 5¼ inches, and we're just going to trim the length once we see it on the front of the card. So going all the way around the edges of my card base, again just scruffing them up with the edge of my scissors. So to make our tag, we're going to measure across the short edge of the cardstock. So you can see here I'm just marking ½ inch from the left hand side and ½ inch from the right hand side, and then I'm measuring down and making a mark 1 inch on the right and 1 inch on the left, and by joining those 2 points together it will give me the shape of my tag. So you can draw a ruler line if you prefer, or you can just position your scissors to cut from one section to the other. And don't forget, once you've done that, you've now got a clean edge, and you can just take the edge of your scissors and scruffy the end of your tag. Distress. We're distressing it, not scruffing it, Helen. And I'm just making it a little bit more scruffy. Distressed. And then I'm going to use that as a template to cut the red tag that's going to form a frame around the white one. So this one I'm going to do by eye, but you can measure it if you want to. And once again, out with the distressing. And then with double-sided tape or glue, as I like to use, you can glue those two sections together. You can see we have married up the left-hand edge because that will marry up with the edge of the card, but the rest of the red tag shows around the outside of the white tag. And for the inside of the card, you need a piece that measures 2½ inches wide by 5¾ that's of the white cardstock, and a piece that measures 2½ inches by 5¾ inches. Again, you're going to distress the edges and join them both together. So you can see they're the same length but slightly different widths, so that the red cardstock forms a frame top and bottom of what will become the greeting strip on the inside of the card. So we've got one tag to go on the front and this strip to go on the inside, both of them with lovely distressed edges. Now, those of you that watch my card tutorials know I love to make the inside just as pretty as the outside. And I'm going to be using a mixture of stamps on this card, really just to show you the things that you can look for in your collection that you can use to achieve looks like this one. So this is a greeting by Creative Expressions, so happy birthday to you. You can always stamp the greeting later when you know who you're going to give the card to. This one already was given as a card last year for somebody's birthday, because this tutorial has been made a long time, and these little butterflies are from the Antique Botanical set by Rubber Dance. I've also stamped 2 of those little butterflies onto a spare piece of cardstock, and I'm going to carefully cut them out. And I'm not quite sure how I did it, but I managed not to take myself stamping the greeting onto the tag, but I can tell you it's from the Think Again set, also by Rubber Dance. It really is a fun sentiment. Today I choose to be happy, so it's a perfect sentiment to choose to use on a birthday card, and I really love that crazy font. So I decided I needed a little bit of extra definition around the edge of the card, so I'm using an ink blending tool and just brushing a little bit of that red ink all the way around the outside edge of the card, then opening the card up and doing exactly the same on the inside. So inking the edges inside and out. Then you can attach the greeting strip to the inside of your card, avoiding that fold edge, and you can see I've just got a little bit extra sticking out at that outside edge. So just taking that off with my scissors again, just going over the edge again once more just to scruffy it up again and take away that cut edge, and adding a little bit of ink to finish off the inside. How pretty does that look? It could quite easily be the outside. And then I'm adding 2 holes to the end of the tag, and that's going to allow me to thread through that little rag ribbon that we created. So this was a strip of the cotton, the same that we used for the daisy. It's roughly 1/2 inch wide. I've just frayed it a little bit, and then I'm going to tie it into a little bow. A little bit fiddly. I probably could have done with a slightly longer strip to start with and then trimmed it to the length that I wanted. So if you want to cut a strip a little bit longer, I started off with mine being 10 inches. You probably could have had it, perhaps try 12 inches, and it might not be quite so fiddly. I got there in the end, and then I'm just trimming off the excess and again just fraying the edges. Then I'm adding some double-sided foam tape to the back of the tag. This is really sticky stuff. It makes a horrible mess of my scissors if I'm not careful. But it does the trick and will support the tag and raise it from the front of the card. Plus I'm going to add quite a heavy embellishment with that flower, so I need this to be quite well stuck down. And marrying it up with the folded edge right in the centre of the card. So things are starting to take shape. So my daisy will go on there. I've also cut out, using these lavish bloom leaves by Tattered Lace, 2 little bits of foliage in the same red cardstock as I've been using, and I also punched out a red heart. You could use a button if you wanted to at this point, but I used a heart punch, and then I went around the outside edge, removing all my pins with a ball tool and literally just drawing gently around the outside edge, which just curves and gives a little bit of dimension to that heart and makes it look like it is actually a button. So again, you could use a button if you've got one that matches exactly. I didn't have one that matched the colour of cardstock that I was using. And remember those couple of little butterflies, just going around the edges with a little bit of that fired brick distress ink. And we've got all our bits and pieces together. You could use other dies for the foliage, leave the foliage out if you want to. The choices are all yours. This is all about ideas, but that daisy, you will find a useful addition to know how to make these to put onto your projects. So I'm using a little bit of silicone glue to make sure that this sticks down well, and I'm adding a little bit to the stems of the leaves to hold them into place. And by adding a little bit to the leaves, it just gives them a bit of support, and I'm placing them so that they kind of wrap around and emphasize that lovely greeting. So literally just tiny little bits. You could use foam pads if you wanted to, depending on the foliage that you're using. Then adding my flour. This will take a little while to dry, but once it's set it will be solid and definitely won't fall off in the post. And then again a little bit of that silicone glue to support my little cardboard heart shape, which I'm securing over the front of the flower. Then little bits of silicone glue. I'm actually using a make called Pin Flare and adding a little butterfly to the centre heart and then another little butterfly, just lifting the wings from the card and sitting him just below that sentiment. So it's still raining outside. I've got time to go and have a look if I've got any more tutorials waiting for me to edit over in my archives. If I have, I'll be back with you very soon. So if you've enjoyed this tutorial, I really hope that you have tons of fun making these gorgeous raggedy daisies. They will adorn any project, not just this card. Don't forget you can make this in any colour. You can use the stamps that you've got in your collection. It really is a fun tutorial to recreate using the things that you've got in your stash, and you'll achieve a slightly different look, but it will still look fabulous. I really hope you have fun making your raggedy daisies. If you've enjoyed this tutorial, as usual, don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and in particular that share button, because it really does help me spread the word about all the creativity going on this channel. I look forward to sharing more creativity with you very soon. Until then, thank you for watching. If you want another idea for using that raggedy daisy, this one's a little bit more refined and smaller, you could perhaps look at this tutorial for this gorgeous Graphic 45 card. Perhaps you want to see how to use more of those gorgeous antique botanical stamps by Rubber Dance. Check out this tutorial and this playlist. You could also pop along to my Etsy shop where you'll find out how to make gorgeous cards like this time after time. I'll show you how to Zentangle them, I'll show you how to stamp with them, I'll show you how to paper piece with them, and there are 10 gorgeous designs. 5 everyday designs and 5 Christmas designs. You will have a ton of fun with these, I can promise you, all with full tutorials. You can have so much fun with these, so don't forget to pop over to my Etsy shop where you can make your purchase. You'll get, I think it's about 14 videos in total showing you how to make all these different looks, and you get all of those patterns that you can print off time after time. So pop over to my Etsy shop where you can buy and download this workshop.